The attack on a journalist by participants of an Antifa rally in downtown Portland, Oregon, has thrust the group and its violent tactics back into the national limelight. Just Saying covered the alt-left and its alt-right counterparts back in December. But now it's time for an update on the extreme group as well as media bias. Welcome to Just Saying. I'm Allison Cardivold. I want to thank you for joining me for the first in a series of episodes that will update various topics covered in the podcast's first year. I'm working on several of these updates at the same time because there are multiple ongoing developments. There's some pretty cool stuff with volcanoes, there is some serious tea with Google, and there's others as well. I will try to get them out to you in short order, but we will begin with the one that had everyone a Twitter over the weekend. A review of the episode entitled New Year, New Extremes, Know and Beware the Alts, can give you some great background on the extremist movements currently active in the United States. That's the one that I did back in December, right before the new year. So I'm going to proceed under the assumption that you've already listened to it. If you haven't, go back and either use your app, use the website, lots of different ways you can do that. The most recent developments in this story can also serve as an ongoing example to update Just Saying's very first official episode that addressed media bias. That episode has two parts. You might want to give them a listen as well. And again, you can do that by going to the website at gistssayn.com. Listen to it on your favorite apps. Or you can use the links in the show notes. I'm going to put links to these individual episodes in there. And those links will take you to the website page that has both the article and an embedded player right there. So you can listen to it as you read. Do it however you like. Just participate, listen, and let me know what you think as well. All right, we're going to get started here. So multiple groups, including Rose City Antifa and the Proud Boys, went to the streets to protest in downtown Portland on Saturday, June 29th. Now, protests by these groups in Portland are not unusual, nor is the fact that police ended up declaring the unpermitted roving demonstrations that blocked roadways part of the day as acts of civil disturbance and unlawful assembly. Police reports citing a few arrests and minor injuries are also not unusual. Unfortunately, this has become part of the daily routine almost in Portland. They have message systems to warn workers that are downtown. You know, it's like an alert system saying, oh, there's a protest going. You better leave your building now while you can. It's kind of crazy. But again, if you want to understand these and other fringe organizations better, link back to the previous episode and article, and I talk about it more in depth there. But here we go. What got Twitter flapping on this particular weekend was the uploaded video of an attack on a journalist and the varied responses to it. Andy No is an editor and photojournalist for Quillette, an online magazine described as, depending on the sources you choose, a libertarian or conservative publication. The publication's founder has also been described as a, quote, darling of the darknet, unquote. So during the Rose City Antifa protest in Portland on the 29th, No was attacked by multiple masked people dressed in black bloc. If you listen to the episode, you'll know black bloc is when everybody wears complete black clothing, hoods, helmets, and masks so that they can't be identified. And generally, those are the people who are up to no good during protests. Not all of them, but usually the ones that have hidden their faces. So after the attack on Monday, I think it was, No told Fox News' Tucker Carlson, quote, while hearing people chant, no hate, no fear, I'm suddenly bashed on the back of my head. A mob of people, all dressed in black and wearing masks, started beating me with their fists, and some of them used objects to hit me. All of this time, I kept thinking, where are the police, unquote. Video of the assault, of which there are at least 2 different angles, shows No being punched, kicked, and struck by projectiles. Some of those projectiles included multiple milkshakes that had been handed out for free at the event. Visibly bruised and bloodied, No went to the hospital where he was admitted overnight and treated for what his lawyer describes as a brain bleed. It wasn't severe enough that he had to stay there longer than overnight, but sometimes with concussions and those types of things, you don't even feel all of the effects of that until kind of later on. My daughter, I just went through that with her, so it can be worse than you think it is initially, so you shouldn't mess around with it. At any rate, the online magazine Quillette is based in Australia, but No is based in Portland and has been threatened by Antifa groups before for his coverage of the movement that includes reporting efforts that claim some alleged hate crimes in the city of Portland are hoaxes. So Antifa does not like him. They know who he is. They even talked about him before this event. He was a little worried about it. He had tweeted out. And during the attack, you can hear, if you listen to the video, which I have embedded on the website, you can hear people saying his name. So this did seem to be a targeted attack, that they knew who he was and they went after him. Media outlets that appear to sympathize with Antifa, as well as those individuals who condone Antifa's premise that violence is an acceptable political tactic, characterize No as a white supremacist sympathizer and a right-wing provocateur. I do not profess to know the man's personal views. But in this case, in my mind, contrary views do not justify a physical attack on a journalist or a private person for that matter. And secondly, he does not fit the typical profile associated with white supremacy. No is a gay son of Vietnamese immigrants. His parents actually escaped Vietnam after the fall of Saigon at the end of the Vietnam War. So they immigrated to the United States. He was born and raised in Portland. And he says the characterizations of him are not accurate. In an interview following the attack, he said, quote, "Absolutely not. This is what I mean when they're adopting the rhetoric tactics of Antifa. It's to demonize your ideological opponents as quote unquote Nazis or fascists. So then they have the moral legitimacy to attack you and get praised for it in the public," unquote. No's detractors say his publications criticize some progressive views and Islam, and he says he doesn't get support from the LGBTQ community because he is not the right kind of victim. He may be right. The Human Rights Campaign describes itself on Twitter as the nation's largest LGBTQ civil rights organization in the country. The organization's bio reads, quote, "We envision a world where LGBTQ people are ensured equality at home, at work, and in every community," unquote. Yet the night that No was attacked, an HRC communications staffer tweeted on a personal account that No was not only asking for it, he was basically hoping for it, and that it was the best thing that could ever have happened to his career. I have embedded the tweet in the article on the website, so you can read it for yourself if you'd like, as well as all the other things that I'm citing as I go through this podcast. I always try to include those links where you see where I got my source material. In the tweet, Charlotte Clymer wrote, quote, "Andy No intentionally provokes people on the left to drive his content. Being attacked today on video taken by an actual journalist, because No is definitely not, is the greatest thing that could have happened to his career. You know it, I know it, he knows it, we all know it." In the next tweet, Clymer added, "Violence is completely wrong, and I find it sad and weak to allow a sniveling weasel like Andy No to get under one's skin like this, but I'm also not going to pretend that this wasn't No's goal from the start." In contrast, Quillette magazine describes No as, quote, "an elfin, soft-spoken man," unquote, who does not fit Antifa's narrative of, quote, "smashing the heteronormative white supremacist patriarchy," unquote. Quillette believes the attack on No further exposes Antifa for what it really is. In an article posted after the attack, it wrote, quote, "Like schoolboy characters out of Lord of the Flies, these cosplay revolutionaries stomp around imagining themselves to be heroes stalking the great beast of fascism. But when the beast proves elusive, they gladly settle for beating up journalists, harassing the elderly, or engaging in random physical destruction," unquote. Quillette has previously published articles critical of what it calls the cozy relationship some media representatives have with the Antifa movement. In it, publishers allege that some outlets, such as The Guardian and HuffPost, are actually cheerleaders for the group. Quillette believes the media is too quick to portray Antifa as a peaceful, quote, "anti-fascist community defense group," unquote, and ignore or give moral justification to its tactics that are often more violent than those of the right-wing movements the group opposes. So on Twitter, you had people responding from all over the country and really all over the world, putting in their 2 cents. But how did Portland respond to this? Well, Portland police have long faced criticism for letting protesters, particularly those affiliated with Antifa, wander the streets pretty unimpeded, often disrupting traffic and intimidating or outright threatening those who merely pass by. Other critics blame the mayor, saying that he at least sympathizes with Antifa's beliefs and at worst uses the group to attack people and organizations he cannot, but wishes he could. An example used in that context is when police stood by and allowed Antifa to surround the building where federal ICE employees work in Portland to the extent that they could not freely enter or exit the building for days. It is no secret that Portland police have a policy, be it from their chief or from the mayor and city council, to really hang back and let things play out on their own. You can see it in video after video where people are getting roughed up and the police are keeping their distance down the street and they don't intervene. But shortly after 3 on the day of this attack, the Portland Police Bureau advised protesters that their gathering was now a civil disturbance and an unlawful assembly, meaning if they did not disperse, the protesters would be subject to arrest or the use of force by the police. The hundreds gathered did not immediately disperse, yet police reported making only 3 arrests that day. So they really try to let these things play out on their own, even if it means people who are not involved in the protest, everyday people just trying to get around Portland, have to go out of their way and avoid the downtown area. I have friends that live there, and they say they don't go down anymore. And another friend who works in the downtown area, and he says they have a text alert system that tells them you need to leave the building or you're going to get trapped in downtown. Can you imagine? Not every city would put up with that, that's for sure. But during the clashes, police also put out a warning that some of the milkshakes that had been handed out during the protests may contain a quick-drying cement type substance. But according to a police press release, the information came from at least one officer who reportedly witnessed a suspicious powdery substance being mixed into an already made shake, as well as a note that was sent to police that said the shake recipe included the toxic substance. The report did not come from No. The next day, police reported that they were still looking into the matter. On July 1st, the mayor of Portland, Ted Wheeler, took to Twitter to make a statement. It said, Portland has always been a beacon of free speech. We are proud of that history, but in the last couple of years, some have increasingly used their opportunity to exercise First Amendment rights as an opportunity to incite violence. Over the weekend, some chose to engage in violence in Portland, which is unacceptable and will not be tolerated. We stand against all forms of violence, regardless of someone's political leanings. Portland police officers have the unenviable task of keeping the peace. It's a difficult job, and hard decisions are made in real time. While we continue to learn more about what transpired over the weekend, we will keep you informed. We will do everything we can to make sure that those who committed violence are held accountable. Again, Mayor Ted Wheeler tweeted that out on July 1st after the events of June 29th. So it was a couple days later. His series of tweets didn't go over very well. They got ratioed, which means there were far more comments than likes. When I last checked, there were more than 18,000 comments compared to 800 likes. The majority of the comments seemed critical. Senator Ted Cruz took to Twitter as well, saying that it was a, quote, sickening criminal assault. And he added, to mainstream journalists, don't cover this up, don't ignore it, unquote. He was also very critical of the mayor and asked for an investigation at a federal level to be started. The video was initially tweeted out on the personal account of an Oregonian photographer, and it made it hard for the media to ignore. Though it does seem that at least some wanted to downplay its importance or at least put qualifiers on it. Portland's local newspaper, the Oregonian, said, quote, Saturday featured only a few isolated flashpoints of violence. Still, one of them has garnered outsized attention, with many in conservative circles condemning the mayor and police for perceived inaction in the face of violence, unquote. The article also referred to No as a right-leaning provocateur. A contributing editor for The Atlantic, Yasha Monk, took the New York Times depiction of events to task, saying, quote, I strongly disagree with some of Andy No's work, but to suggest that he has a history of battling with anti-fascist groups is slander. No criticizes Antifa. Antifa members assaulted him. It's astonishing that this New York Times report erases that difference, unquote. In the article, which he linked to on Twitter, the headline said, in Portland, milkshakes, a punch, and hashtag him too, refresh police criticism. These types of narrative qualifiers in news stories are one of the reasons I started doing this podcast. In my opinion, the coverage of this event by national media was not neutral. However, it at least wasn't ignored. The coverage was nothing in compared to the frenzy of a few months ago when the headlines read things like, quote, the racist, homophobic attack on Jussie Smollett is America's endgame, unquote. That was GQ magazine. Quote, assault on Empire actor Jussie Smollett serves as a reminder, lynching, new symbolism still prevalent. And then there's the New York Times headline, which read, quote, Jussie Smollett, star of Empire, attacked in what police call a possible hate crime, unquote. While few questioned the validity of Jussie Smollett's initial claim that he was attacked by right-wing homophobic lowlifes, in general, even with the video of the event, outlets and their reporters were much more skeptical of No's assertions. New York Times writer Charlie Warzel tweeted that, quote, this whole event should be seen through the context of what it is, an information war. A number of people who go to these protests are looking for fights or to document them. They're all live streaming. When tensions boil over, it's meant to be ammunition for a culture war, unquote. I'm not saying there isn't truth to what Warzel said. There is. However, I've viewed the videos, and from what is visible on them, there is no outward evidence that he was trying to provoke the crowd. Unless, that is, you believe his very presence among the protesters on a city street is grounds for a beating. If that's the case, freedom of the press is dead, and every journalist should be fearful. Because if you can't expect to be protected there, then where can you go unmolested? White House journalists complain when people boo them. They feel attacked. No one's physically going after them. And the fact whether or not he works for a mainstream organization or an independent one, that shouldn't matter. That's not what freedom of the press is about. So there's a little aside on my opinion of media bias. As far as Antifa goes, Colette hopes the media and public obtain a less rose-colored awareness of what the Antifa movement stands for as a result of this attack. In its recent article, it said, quote, "Given the widespread support for no that has manifested itself over the last 24 hours and the corresponding disgust with his attackers, we hope that these events will herald new policies to protect the public, including journalists, from those who claim the right to use violence as a form of political expression. Following the hate killing of Heather Hare by James A. Fields Jr. in Charlottesville, Virginia 2 years ago, attention was drawn to the problem of right-wing political violence, and rightly so. But this attitude of vigilance must be broadened to include all radical groups. It shouldn't require an actual fatality to goad Portland's mayor and police into real action. Surely a brain hemorrhage should be enough." Unquote. So here's the gist. The assault of Andy Ngo will end up in court. Even if police in Portland fail to make arrests and prosecutors fail to bring charges, Ngo's attorney will be filing civil cases against the city, the police department, and those attackers they can identify. In the meantime, there is no real reason to believe that the protests in Portland will stop. Given the mayor's and police department's keep your distance policy, it is more likely that the skirmishes will continue and will likely escalate throughout the summer. The attendance numbers at this event for the Proud Boys and Patriots Prayer were way down from last year, but Antifa is still searching for a fight. If they can't find it in Portland, they will travel elsewhere. Given the media responses to this and other stories, there is also no reason to believe that news bias has improved since I started this podcast a year ago. If anything, it's gotten worse. In this instance, Ngo's political views should not matter. If the headlines read, quote, "liberal writer was attacked by right-wing nationals," unquote, would the response and coverage be the same? The fact is, no. And that's a problem. Concern and outrage should be the response either way. If you think only those members of the press with views that are in lockstep with your own deserve the protection of the First Amendment, then we're lost. But hey, you can agree or disagree, because I'm just saying. Thanks for joining me. Before you leave, make sure you follow the podcast and the website and the Twitter account and the Facebook account. There are links in the show notes. Say hi to Percy, our dog, who's tired of being locked up and wanting to get out. That's my cue to wrap it up. See you next time. Until then, take care.